Hey, this is Chris Duffin. Today, I'm coming at you with Coach Brandon, the Wizard of Training, Special K. Well, I don't know why we call him that, but it's nicer than the other names we have for him. So
we're going to go with that.
Yeah. Today, I want to talk to you about, I guess the topic would be pain management, more of not necessarily when we're in pain, but in that period, getting out of pain and trying to get back to play. And sometimes it's dissipated, sometimes it's in your head, the impacts that it's there, or sometimes we still have it, but it's getting better and we're working through that continuum. So I'm probably going to spend more of my time talking about the athlete perspective. Brandon's got some great topics from the coaching perspective, and Special K can obviously weigh in on both the coaching side, but also maybe the body worker therapist side as well. And so, I have experienced some pretty traumatic pain over the course of my 30 years of training, and some pretty major injuries and getting back to it. For the most part, I've had a lot of the really big ones, herniated discs, torn off muscles, and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that a lot of people don't take into effect is that mental aspect of it. The fact that, hey, I had an injury, maybe I've resolved it, and getting back to it, not really respecting that process or the mental aspect of it. For example, like right now, over the last few months, I've had some pains kind of come and go. I made a little bit of it worse with some elective surgery that went into some of the neurology that was being impacted with some of the areas I was training.
That's an interesting way to describe that surgery.
Had the balls clipped, which affects the nerves that go straight through, the stabilizers, pelvic floor, all those areas that really I was like putting through a lot of fatigue. So training for me was a lot of hit or miss, and I started getting these pain signals in some of my workout, and it started creating a lot of fear. And so I'm kind of working out of that, and you don't just go, hey, it's better now, I'm just going to toss this weight on and move into it. You've got to respect the fact that you have to approach it in the same manner that you would training. If you've taken a big gap of time off and you were a 500-pound squatter, you're not just going to jump 500 pounds on the bar. You're going to start lighter, and you're going to build some wins, and that's going to help build the confidence and build the process for getting back there, because you're going to want to get those. You'd be able to move well without pain and start learning and teaching yourself it's safe to get there, particularly in I'd say not particularly, but particularly in my opinion, movements that have a really heavy eccentric type basis, such as the squat, where you're going to have those thoughts running through your head, or in a bench press, or movements like that, to think about that as you're moving into those positions that had perhaps had those signals, that pain experience for you prior, and you're second guessing yourself, right? Or you're thinking about that pain or the possibility of pain, even though it isn't there right now, and that can really throw havoc on you. And I had this happen last week for myself. So I did an 865 triple, and the first one, I think everybody that was spotting me thought that was max effort. There's no way he's going again. Well, it was because I took the squat so slow on the eccentric, because I had all these fears in my head, and I chose that weight. I felt I could do more that day, but I really wanted to get a really nice solid PR under my belt. I had another good successful workout the week before, and I wanted to build on some momentum there. And instead of going for what would potentially push my limits, I kept it back a little bit, but that I could build some momentum. And it still, at the same time, it hit me on that first rep. And then after I got that first one in, I had some confidence, and the second one was easier. The third one was just harder because I had some fatigue at that point in time. But anyway, those are some things that we kind of need to think about, and that's training the mind, and the athlete perspective of having that there, because it's pain isn't necessarily saying something is wrong. Right now, it may be residual, and it may be just you've ingrained it in your mind because you've had so many experiences of that, and you're recreating that experience, which is that's trauma 101, right? We could start going down another path that we're not trained to speak in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you can take this discussion 1,000 different ways. I mean, what you really hit on was expectations after injury and not attaching yourself to that injury ever. I mean, through all your tears and strains and tweaks, there was never a time where you as an athlete said, well, this is what I have now. Whereas we see that very common for people who maybe don't have a great physical background. Maybe they're just getting into training, or, they've been somewhat active and now they're starting to get serious into training. Now they like tweak their back. They go in and they say, oh, you got a slight bulging disc, and they're like, oh, I am a bulging disc now, and they start to identify themselves with that, and that's a whole other set of obstacles to overcome, because we're like, well, you're not that. We're not saying that your therapist is lying to you, and they're not, that is something that exists, but that is not now who you should feel represented as. It's just
not defining you as an athlete,
and it's not like your leg is amputated. Like, all of your body is designed to regenerate and heal under the right circumstances, and almost all things can be that are as a result from trauma in the weight room. Your body can regenerate those things. So you can never attach yourself to any one of these injuries. If you tweak your pec, okay, well, you got to figure out why you did, but you got to start moving past that. And then at that point that you start moving past it, expectations have to change. So as you said, you're not going to go in post-injury and just try and load up 500 pounds again if you're a 500-pound squatter. You have to have some shifting or reframing of expectations as you come back into it. And it's not to say that it's a thing that we always say in seminars. It's, well, you haven't lost any strength. You just can't express your full level of strength right now. And they're like, okay, Whereas if you tell people, well, you're just not strong right now, that sends them into a whole other mental tailspin.
Oh, that can be huge for people that identify their themselves with what they lift and what they do in the gym. And again, that's one of the reasons, like, a lot of times I reference like doing other things, like being more like some people get so involved with like defining themselves as whatever lifter type they are. I'm an Olympic lifter. I'm a power lifter. This is who I am. And I think that's a dangerous game to play for anyone, because at some point, it could be a long ways out. Like, sure. A co-founder of the company is 70 years old. He's flying to Ireland here shortly, and he's a 500-plus pound deadlifter, right? Doesn't say it's going to end tomorrow, but at some point you're going to see a change or diminishment in what we do, and so that's a whole nother topic. But on the back injury side, like, that's one I have experienced a couple different times in my life, and a lot of people may not realize that, and they're like, oh, you don't know because you've never walked this path that I have with blowing a disc or so on. But we're coming up. My daughter's coming up on her 2-year birthday right now, and that means it was about 2 years ago. It wasn't you, but Andre and Jesse had to come to my house and carry me because I was unable to walk to the hospital, so that I could, one, get medication so I could withstand the pain that I was experiencing. And I had to walk through the process just before my last daughter was born, of learning to walk again. And that can, like, if you don't have those other things in your life to kind of draw on, that can be a really, really thing that can get in your head. And so that's where the importance of that, but also knowing and having the confidence that I can work through this. I know the path, I've got a plan, and that can help really with getting wrapped around and not getting caught up so much in the moment that, I'm sitting in a chair getting wheeled in to watch my son's basketball game. This was me 2 years ago. And guess what? If you look at the timeline, you'll notice that it wasn't 6 months post that I squatted 800 pounds every single day for 30 days. So it's these things, understanding that it's not the end of the world. It may change things, may approach but we've got to we can work through it.
Yeah, and people really need it with that whole topic too. We even get into certain terminology like healing and treating and all of these other things with rehab, which generally they all get lumped into one type of context, whereas they're very different. Whereas, if you blow out your back, you have a massive herniation, you might not ever heal it, but you can certainly get back to a place where you can load that area significantly and beyond what you previously did. So even if you say, well, there's no healing it permanently, healing is as to your point, things might change, but you can still continue to move forward. And even through all your injuries, you never really sat down and let it rest until it felt better. No. You're up, making it happen, providing any kind of stimulus you could to your body, because your body adapts to the demands placed on it. And if you just sit around post-injury, it might get a little better, but you're never probably going to get that much better.
Yeah, it's a process you've got to work. So
I remember putting you together on the tail end of that one. That's when I was starting to be more active over here. But one thing to point out, what I hear is you talking, being confident and having a strategy and a plan. And that's one thing you obviously have different than a lot of athletes. Our athletes, have us as a team, but not everybody probably listening to this has a me and a Brandon. And if they're stuck on, by themselves, what's your take for, coaching somebody through that process who doesn't have a coach saying, it's okay, you're not broken, we're going to start here, we're going to progress here, or somebody putting hands on the tissue and saying you're not.
I think you've got to find those right people. Obviously, we're a resource to people, but I don't want to say, hey, you got to call us, right?
Sure.
And we're not on the clinical side of it. We're more, once you get past that, we can help with the process of getting you back, discovering what was wrong. So I'll throw out a couple resources that I send to people. The best thing to do is find somebody that is an athlete-focused provider. They're going to have a better understanding, more aligned with where you want to be than maybe someone else. So always find out who the person is treating that you're going to see. So again, this list doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be great people, that I could vouch for all of them, but there's a couple different lists that you can go to. One of them is rehab, the number 2, performance.com. They have a lot of similar methodology to what we use, a lot of DNS influence. It's required as an education to be on that list. Another one is the clinicalathlete.com. And then the last one is movementproviders.com. So those are great resources to help you find someone in your area on that end of it.
Mm-hmm. Which can be very useful, especially if this is the first time you've experienced that type of injury, and you need someone to kind of say, it's okay, but you got to do this stuff to fix it. It's not just going to fix itself.
Well, a lot of times, we end up in doctor's office, hospital, whatever it is, post injury, and if we talk to somebody that doesn't understand what we're doing, that doesn't train, you can get that response, well, why were you lifting that anyways? Oh, you can't do that again. What were you doing in the first place?
Weren't you told to not lift 20 pounds post your last surgery?
Yes. I wasn't supposed to lift 20 pounds for more than 20 pounds for 20 days or something like that.
Okay.
Am I not supposed to lift my arm?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
So I think that's actually really important, that not all practitioners and therapists are equalized in terms of the people that they treat. Just because someone carries the chiropractic title doesn't necessarily mean they're working with all the same people. You might be working with as a very competent athlete.
Just because they got recommended by a friend.
Right.
Is that friend similar to you as the type of people that, because that may just be a coworker or someone else that, again, do some diligence to help understand what type of people they work with, what kind of philosophy they have. So I think that's important. That's why I throw that out there, because I don't want to say, always reach to Kabuki. That's fine. Do what you need to. And hands-on where you're at is one of the best places immediately post-injury that you can have for doing the assessment to really understand. Because, like I said, both Brandon and I said, things may change after an accident. So Brandon created talking about back injury, Brandon created a really brilliant infographic about a year ago around spinal position an acceptable range, and it's like this red, green, yellow piece. It got bounced all over the place and stolen by many people. But like for me, I have very little window of what's my range, because I've my first injury to herniation in my back, and that's what repeated here 2 years ago, was much earlier in my career when I was doing very bad things. But I've got to deal with that. But it doesn't mean at the end of the day it changes a lot for what I can load and how I can do things. I just have a much finer window for quality of movement. And I think you'll see that in my lifting, why I'm always in really great position. And if I'm not, I stop. So,
well, you were also a lifter who got injured much more frequently when you were younger and had a lower training age, which is not as common, probably because people just don't stay in it that long. But your incidence of injury now is far fewer because you do have a tighter tolerance, and you know how to be introspective of how your body's moving and feeling, and then you know the things, or you have someone who can tell you what those things are to get you out of those things.
We don't need to rehash that one.
No, that's okay. But even back to the one thing that I even wanted to touch on even briefly was back to choosing practitioners, is if you go into a clinic and they try and sell you on like a 10-week package or something, there should be warning and
walk away.
Yeah, flags going up in your head. We have a great clinic that we send all of our athletes to here locally. What's Snell's office called? I just say go to Snell.
It's Philip Snell.
Yeah,
you'll find it for local in Portland.
He has an office that has fantastic practitioners.
He's over at Evolution now.
Yeah, and so we'll go in there, and he's like, okay, well, you got to do this, get out of this, and see me if you have to in a month. And we're like, all right, we generally don't have to. A lot of times we're working with practitioners who are teaching us and reintegrating movement in neurology versus just taking you and treating things, which there's a huge place for treatments, and we have to get out of pain, but we also have to be retaught in how to, we have to change the signal that our brain is sending to our body to reorganize our movement. And if you're only getting treatment week after week after week and the things aren't getting better, you should probably see someone else who's actually changing that signal in your brain to actually move better.
Yeah, finding someone that doesn't want to see you again is a good goal.
Very good sign.
And they are out there. You would think, why are they? Well, because they don't need to, because they have really great authority in their field, and they get a ton of clients because they do just that. Their goal is to fix you, not to sell packages of, I need to lock you into, it's going to be 8 weeks before we work through this, and we're going to have to crack that back every week and do whatever it is. You need me to have my hands on you to be doing this. That isn't a good signal. That's because that's actually the opposite of where we want to go. To have that confidence and the ability to really believe that we can move forward. As I'm speaking as an athlete here again, but you could also take this from a coaching discussion. You've got to know that you can own it and you can fix it.
Well, you're the only one who can too.
You can, and that's the big. That's like, I've walked away from major injuries that have completely devastated other people's careers because of that mentality. Because no one else can fix you. You are the one that has control. If you take ownership of that, that's what you can. That is the power. And so you want to align yourself with anybody that you're dealing with, from a coaching or clinical care, that has that same philosophy about giving you the tools to empower you. But at the end of the day, you're the one that takes ownership, and you're going to fix it.
Well, look at passive modalities that we talk a lot about. That's just what I think when I hear you say that. I don't want to do the work for you all the time because I can't. Surgery might reattach a muscle, but it's not going to fix the problem. The pain medicine, the passive care in chiropractic, massage therapy, physical therapy, any one of those, I can't rely on that to fix my problems. At some point in time, the pain meds are going to stop. I can't get more chiropractic care, and I'm still not moving well. It has to go back to an active modality, and the athlete has to take ownership in taking it to the next level, or we'll just lay there and expect somebody to fix our problems for us.
And when we have athletes who invest in like chiropractic work throughout an entire training cycle, it's not a bad idea to have someone who can be there to do maintenance work on you and things of that nature.
Or some further assessment, another set of eyes.
Right.
So I have multiple people that I see. Right. Kyle does LMT for me. Francesca, our in-house Cairo does work on me. I see Snell is another set of eyes if I need to.
I just see that
Brandon provides me some input, but usually it's completely useless, and I disregard him. Okay.
Do the exact opposite.
Well, I was going to say too, with those,
we've got Cassandra that'll give me input. She's one of our PTAs that's on our coaching staff. So I use a lot of people. You don't need to do that.
Toolbox though.
Yeah.
I always like athletes to have a big toolbox from stuff you can pull from. But you can't expect the one thing in your toolbox to fix the issue.
Well, and you're also doing a lot of stuff outside of those too. So, and that's the difference is you have all of these people you're going to, but you're not an individual who's like, well, I got to go get fixed this week so I can train next week. It's like, I'm adding this to I'm doing everything that I can to train at the highest level I can. And those athletes who get locked into that dependency loop of going to therapists and chiros to fix them, they never become completely autonomous, which is our goal for all of our athletes is to have autonomy with them.
Yeah, so the point I was trying to make with like me using all those different resources is me not thinking that I know all the answers and I'm going to have the solutions and all that. Like another set of eyes is always good to capture something else that I'm missing, or maybe the person I'm working with is missing, because again, they've got a certain viewpoint, a certain philosophy, so on. And it's not a bad thing if you have extra resources and you're hitting a wall. You're not moving forward. So if everything's working, go with it.
And it's just like training. If we have a home gym, we can do 90% of the things that are going to get us what we need. But if we have some dumbbells, we just added another tool. If we have a couple of these specific machines now, we can do a couple other things. And if we have, a belt squat, maybe we can get a little bit more volume in. And that's the way that people should look at therapists in the geist of maintenance and hey, let's just do everything we can right now. We're not necessarily talking about fixing traumatic issues like tears and things of that nature, but I suppose it could be loosely applied to that.
Post surgical intervention, sure. Regardless of how bad the injury is, we still have to end up at the same point.
So, Brandon, before we wrap up this discussion, could you spend a little bit more time discussing like how you would work on from the athlete coach relationship from like a communication standpoint, or things that, because we do have a lot of people that are doing just what we do out there as well on the coaching side.
Yeah, so there's a few different elements to that. One is the psychology, and that really just comes down to communication, effective communication between coach and athlete, because you can't necessarily say, well, we don't want you doing, a hard set of 5 today because I can't have you injure yourself again. We're like, hey, let's do some more belt squats so you can do more work today. And those are, we're getting to the same thing. It's just about how we're telling that person. So we really have to bring down their sense of frailty in their mind when it comes to communication. Say, hey, I know that the doctor said that you have, a herniated disc, but that's gonna fix itself under the right conditions, but it's gonna come down to you. I'm not gonna fix it. Your doctor's not gonna fix it. You're gonna be the one to fix it. And we always kind of have this like broad scope of where we need to get, and we kind of start at one place or another depending on your previous relationship with the athlete. Like if I have Kyle, I've worked with Kyle now for 4 or 5 years. I can be very blunt with Kyle. One, he's a coach, and he's a coach for us as well. But even if he wasn't, I'd be able to have that same conversation with him, and he wouldn't freak out. Whereas if I had someone who's maybe this is their first injury, they haven't been training long, they haven't been with me that long, I'm not going to be like, hey, you can't do this because you're going to hurt yourself again. I'm going to be like, hey, let's do these other things so we can do more work in these other areas. And then the other part of it comes down to your actual programming strategy, because you can't just give them back the same program. We have to help them change their expectations, and we do that by taking out the thing that they were performing at the highest level at. Like if we have someone who's has injured themselves in a squat and they keep doing it, and they have now like some chronic stuff, and they have like this real roadblock mentally to it, we have to help them change their expectations by doing something one that's maybe novel that they haven't done before. Like, instead of us going immediately back to low bar squatting this block, let's do some front squatting, or let's do some safety bar squatting or belt squatting, something that they can now have a win at, because strength athletes, we're mostly talking to strength athletes here, people who want to get stronger, their wins are pounds on the bar. And if they're not getting close to what their best is, that always provides some what's the word, like not negativity to them, but they're a little discouraged when they're not up at their absolute best all the time.
Insecurities, right? It makes me second guess what I'm doing.
Yeah, and so we just give them a different stimulus and say, hey, let's go to town on this one. The different stimulus has to be one that's inherently safer, right, in quotations, and nothing's really safer. We're just stacking our coins in the side that it has a less likelihood of re-injury, and then we say, hey, let's do this for as long as we can. And now I'm still probably going to have some low bar squatting in, but it's going to be slowly reintroduced, like a couple reps a week, a couple more reps a week, until we fully scale loading appropriately. And scaling load is really where a coach can greatly benefit the athlete. And if we can properly scale load back, then with all things, and assuming that they're doing the right things out of there, and they're sleeping, which is a huge aspect to all of this that we haven't talked about yet, but we probably don't have time to talk about. But there's a significant role that a coach can play in this, and it's not just about getting fixed by your therapist, but it is about returning back to your normal state, changing expectations going into that, and then actually finding some success with things that maybe you haven't done in a while. And that's my vomited version of,
sure,
there's a lot of things going on.
Speaking from, I haven't spoke from an athlete standpoint yet. I've been injured, a handful of times myself, herniated discs, torn ligaments in knees, broken bones from fighting, all kinds of stuff while working.
Yeah, that jiu-jitsu can be a little rough when you combine it with powerlifting.
Yeah, we have a laundry list, but clearly what I heard you say and what I've noticed going back through that is, a good coach's job is not just building up the athlete physically. If you can make me mentally strong and mentally confident, that's going to carry over into what my body's able to physically express.
Mm-hmm. And it goes both ways. The athlete has to be willing to accept some of that too. So oftentimes we'll talk to people and we'll say, oh, you're missing some rotation in your hip, or you're missing, a little bit of range of motion in this left shoulder, and that might be what's causing your pinching, or that might be what's causing your pain. And they go, no, I just have pain. Like a great example of this, and I loved it at our last seminar we had here, hosted by Brad Cox of Vacuum Mobility. We were going around the room and we were just kind of talking as a group. And one guy goes, well, I have this neck thing that I'm just going to have forever. And so what can I do? And Brad goes, why would you have that forever? Like, why would you even, what are you even saying? Like, this is not an incurable disease that you have. Like, and the guy he was already closed off to anything
sure,
that someone could potentially help him would have. So it goes both ways. The athlete has to be very welcoming and accepting of things that their coach or guiders are going to say. But there's a huge role that effective coaching can play on this.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's a really good discussion, unless you gentlemen have anything else to add?
I don't think so. I think we're going to try and do this maybe once a week, depending on what topics we have brewing up under the roof of the lab here. And if you guys have suggestions for other types of discussions, I would say definitely send them to coaching@kabukistrength.com, or just DM one of the Instagram accounts.
Okay. Thank you. Signing out.